Hello, Marcelo.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm well.
Thank you so much for joining this afternoon.
Sure, sure.
Well, another day, a friend said that Mudhoney is like the New York Dolls of grunge, idolatrated by the giants, but much less known than it should be by the general public. Could you please comment on how accurate do you find this definition?
Well, we've lasted a lot longer than the New York Dolls.
Yeah.
uh, and our drug habits weren't nearly as profound.
But do you agree that regarding the idolatry, uh, maybe Mudhoney should be more recognized by general public? Just like
Ah,
the New York Dolls?
that's not really up to me. That's up to the general public. I'm
Okay.
not complaining about where we're at. I mean,
And
because we're aware of like the history of probably the expectations and the realities of bands like the New York Dolls, the Stooges, the MC5, um, you know, countless bands that like were on major labels and like thought that maybe they would be as big as I don't know, like bigger than they ever got. Uh, I think by the time we came along, we'd seen that history over and over again with these certain types of bands that we really love and realize that this is the path we've chosen. And if we're lucky, people will like us at all. You know, we're not like a band that is designed for mass consumption.
it will be the seventh time Honey has come to Brazil. I think you're already able to say what you like most here, right?
In terms of playing, the audiences are fantastic. Super enthusiastic and a lot of fun. Uh, um, and I'm a big fan of the food.
And what can we expect from the show scheduled for March?
Uh, we don't really, I mean, we just don't have expectations. We have hopes and hopes that people will show up and have a good time.
Okay. And talking about the early days now, Green River, which you were a part of, is often cited as the first true grunge band. And what was the Seattle music scene like in the 80s when the band started?
The Melvins were already going before Green River. What was it like? I mean, the whole vibe of Seattle was very different. It wasn't the tech economy. It was just like basically Boeing was a major employer. Um, like my father worked for Boeing, and it was like a very kind of middle class, working class town. Where in the 2000s, like as the tech economy grew and grew with um, the rise of like Microsoft and Amazon and Google and all this stuff, like there are people here who have a lot of money, and it's kind of driven out the people who don't, in a way, right?
Right.
And if it wasn't for the fact that like we were all able to buy houses in the early 90s, we probably wouldn't be able to live here. Um, and that I think is like the biggest thing that has changed. But also in terms of shows, there were maybe 200, maybe 300 people who would like go to a local show. Somehow, like when a bigger punk band like the Dead Kennedys or Black Flag would show up, there'd maybe be like 1,000 or something, and you'd just be, where did all these people come from? Because they're not going to like, and local shows with just local bands would like maybe top out at about 100,
Today,
you
do
know.
you
But there are probably many more shows where it's just 20 people.
today do you see Green River more as a product of circumstance or as a well thought out and necessary revolution at the time?
It's not, we didn't think of it as a revolution. We were just, we, except for Stone, we were all part of like the local hardcore scene. Um, and we were just trying to figure out next steps, like you can only just, it seemed like, like even Black Flag changed and slowed down, but there were so many bands that were just copies of other bands. And it's like, how many fake minor threats do you need, you know? Uh, so it seemed like it was kind of becoming, instead of like a creative, the creative cool thing that it initially was, it became like the rules were getting more rigid for like the kind of music you had to play to like be accepted in the scene. And we were trying to like break out of that and try to come up with something else. And a lot of it was just sort of like looking to the, you know, digging deep into like our old record collections, a lot of records that we actually probably had sold when we got into punk rock, and revisiting them, and um, and trying to come up with something that blended things together in a new way, you know?
The song In and Out of Grace opens with a sample of the eulogy from Pierre Fonda on the movie The White Angels. And we want to be free to do what we want to do. Can we consider this prioritization of creative freedom the mindset under which Mudhoney has always operated?
I would say that clip is more just included because it's it's so. I mean, basically, all he's saying is he wants to get high and fuck, right? It's just funny, you
Okay.
know. It's not like an anthemic statement, like we want to be free, we want to be free to ride and do what we want to do. We want to be free to get loaded and not be hassled by the man. I mean, that's just like, is that a statement of purpose? Maybe for some. It just seemed like a really funny thing.
In your opinion, is it possible to achieve stratospheric success without making any concessions?
Is it possible to achieve success without making concessions?
Yeah, without smoothing off or whatever.
I don't know, like I mean, do you think Taylor Swift thinks she's making concessions? I don't think she does. She's probably doing exactly what she wants to do, and she's huge.
Do you feel that something changed in the mentality of the grunge bands or in the unity of the scene as a whole from the moment the bands started gaining national prominence?
Well, more people started going to shows, and yeah, things changed. I think that's kind of obvious. Um,
But I meant, did the camaraderie gave way to rivalry?
no, I mean, it might have for some people, like maybe someone in some band you've never heard of, like, might have been a little jealous of the people who made it big. there's, probably a fair amount of bitter people who felt like they deserved to get what Pearl
Mhm.
Jam got or something like that, but in terms of the bands who are actually friends, I don't think there was any rivalry, you know.
At what point
And I'm
did
sure there's actually a lot of people who are just like happy for these bands to be as huge as they got. But also, that kind of came with a double-edged sword with like
uh,
uh, some people, didn't survive it very well.
do you consider yourself a survivor?
Uh, no, not really. I mean, it's not like, I was stuck in the Arctic for 2 years and finally made my way out.
Uh, at what point did you realize the impact of grunge on popular culture? The moment you realize, well, this thing is getting real big.
What was that? Sorry.
At what point did you realize the impact of grunge on popular culture? The moment you realize, oh man, the shit is getting too big.
Yeah, I mean, we thought it was huge in like '89, before the actual crossover into the mainstream, which was like, I guess, '91, you know. Um, but that was all kind of like on a fanzine level. um, and college radio. It wasn't, like actually commercial radio and magazines like Time or Newsweek. It had moved out of just like being covered by the bigger music magazines like Rolling Stone or Spin. It had moved into like popular culture as a whole, which was kind of crazy.
What feeling comes to mind when you think about the past?
The past,
Yeah.
I don't really think about it that much, except when I'm being asked about it. It's not like I dwell on it and go like, oh, those were the days. I really wish I could go back there. Because I don't. I'm happier now than I've ever been in my life. It's just too bad, like my body is now 63 years old.
Thinking about today with the reality of digital platforms without an MTV, can you imagine a mass movement like grunge happening and bringing rock music back to the center of attention?
Without MTV,
Without MTV and with the streaming platforms instead of the record stores and
I'm not. I mean, I think like with streaming platforms, there's less of a focus. Like when you have something like a gatekeeper like MTV or commercial radio that only plays certain things, that's what people are going to be exposed to, unless they're like record collectors who go to stores and dig through records and try to find stuff. But most people are kind of passive music listeners, right? They're like, oh, they hear this thing on the radio or on MTV, and it's like, oh, that's good enough, you know? And now in streaming, I think it's all driven by algorithms. And so people like maybe hear a song they like, but they don't do any further investigation, because there's like, you can look at streams at certain records and like maybe a song that was on a TV show, like that has a million streams and all the others are in the low thousands, So it's not like people are even curious about the artist anymore. They just like they want to hear that one song. And there's so much different music available on at your fingertips, which I think is great. And so I think some people, the more curious, have become kind of omnivores. It doesn't, it's, they can like listen to different genres of things and like them equally, and they're not like identifying with like, oh, I'm a punk or I like country or you know what I mean? Like they just kind of listen to whatever they want to hear. And that is great. But also I don't know if like people, when your resources were more limited and it was just like you buy one record at a time, you were almost forced to listen to that record over and over and over again. Like even if you didn't necessarily like it at first, but you'd give it several tries, and maybe that record sucked, and you don't ever go back to it again, or maybe there was something about it that like broke open in your mind and made sense, and like hearing a record like Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart, you're not going to fucking understand that the first time you hear it. You have to like
It's been over and over again.
over and over and over and over again. Maybe you still think it's shit, or maybe you think like this is fucking amazing, you know?
What comes next for you for Mudhoney?
Um, well, the next thing we play a show in Portland without Guy with Jim Sangster on bass, and then we go down to Brazil and Argentina and in Chile and Mexico City, which we're
Can
very excited about.
Sure. And as for my last question, you mentioned that never been happier before. You're living the best moment in your life. Could you please elaborate a little more on this?
Well, my personal life, I'm happy with where I'm at. I'm not like a heartbroken 20-year-old. you know.
This pretty sums up. Mark, thank you so much for your time. Hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. I got a question for you. Do you play guitar?
Yeah,
Do you know about Meteoro amps?
Meteoro amps.
Meteoro amplifiers?
It's a Brazilian brand.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I used to have one. It speaks pretty loud.
I mean, they make various ones, right? Like
Yeah,
one's kind of like a Marshall. Do they make one that's sort of like a Fender Twin?
I don't really know, but I can find this information and give it to you as soon as I find it.
Oh, okay. I mean, I found their website, but it's in Portuguese, so I can't understand it.
Send Eric the website so I can read and inform you what you want to know.
Okay.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much. See you in São
Uh,
Paulo.
okay, great. Thank you, Marcelo.
Bye bye.